Music, no one tells you that growth can feel like grief. Not loud grief, not dramatic grief, but a quiet ache that settles in slowly. One day, you realize the people who once felt like home still recognize you, but no longer reach you. Nothing exploded. No argument. No betrayal. Just distance. And that distance didn't come from anger. It came from change. You didn't leave them. You evolved past a version of yourself that fit. And that's the part that hurts the most. Because outgrowing people doesn't feel like success. It feels like guilt. It feels like you broke an unspoken promise to stay the same. Everyone celebrates growth in theory. Level up. Move forward. Become more. But no one warns you about the emotional cost of becoming someone new, while others remain familiar. At first, the shift is almost invisible. Conversations feel recycled. The same stories. The same complaints. The same jokes that used to land, but now don't. You notice yourself holding back, editing, softening your wins, shrinking your curiosity, not because you think you're better, but because you don't want to create discomfort. That's when the guilt begins. You start asking yourself quiet questions. Am I changing too much? Am I becoming unrelatable? Am I abandoning people just by growing? Here's what rarely gets said. Outgrowing others doesn't mean you think you're superior. It means the relationship was built for a version of you that no longer exists. And relationships don't always end loudly. Most of the time, they dissolve silently. You once bonded over shared struggles, shared confusion, shared stagnation. But now you're solving problems they're still living inside. You're asking questions they're avoiding. You're choosing discomfort in a way they're not ready for. Suddenly, you feel like the outsider, even though you're the one who changed. And somehow, you feel responsible for that. But growth doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't negotiate. It happens. And when it does, awareness follows. You begin noticing patterns you once excused. Emotional loops you used to tolerate. Dynamics that once felt normal, but now feel draining. You're still in the same room, but emotionally, you've moved somewhere else. And the strange part? You miss them. You miss who they were to you. You miss who you were with them. You miss the version of yourself that didn't analyze every interaction, that didn't feel guilty for wanting more. Because growth isn't just expansion, it's loss. And society rarely shows that side. We see the glow-up, the confidence, the clarity. We don't see the nights you wonder why improvement feels lonely, why success feels heavier than failure, why doing better comes with emptiness. And it's not because you're ungrateful. It's because growth separates before it connects. There's a phase no one prepares you for. You're no longer who you were, but you're not yet surrounded by people who match who you're becoming. So you float. You don't fit into old conversations. You don't fully belong in new ones. And because you're empathetic, because you remember where you came from, you carry guilt for the distance. But hear this clearly. Outgrowing others is not cruelty. It's self-respect. When you choose honesty over comfort, awareness over avoidance, growth over familiarity, some relationships can't follow. Not because the people are bad, but because the connection was tied to an earlier version of you. You didn't wake up and decide to leave. You stopped abandoning yourself. And that changed everything. This guilt feels intense for a reason. Humans are wired for belonging. For most of history, separation meant danger. Isolation wasn't emotional. It was survival. So when growth threatens connection, your nervous system panics. Even if your mind understands evolution, your body feels loss. That's why you second-guess yourself. Why you consider shrinking back. Why you wonder if staying small would be easier. But peace that requires self-betrayal isn't peace. It's delay. And eventually, the cost shows up. You feel drained after conversations that once energized you. You feel misunderstood even when listened to. You feel like you're either over-explaining or disappearing. That's when guilt turns into grief. Because you're not just losing people. You're grieving futures that will never happen. Inside jokes that don't land. Plans that no longer align. Versions of life that quietly expired. There was no explosion, just evolution. And invisible grief is the hardest to justify. The guilt whispers. Shouldn't I stay loyal? Shouldn't I be grateful? Shouldn't I try harder? But here's the truth most people learn too late. Staying the same to protect others eventually becomes resentment. You show up less, care less, not because you stopped loving, but because you're tired of living somewhere you've already outgrown. Growth doesn't erase where you came from. It honors it without letting it trap you. Some people will feel left behind, not because you abandoned them, but because they chose familiarity over transformation. That doesn't make them wrong. It makes your paths different. And the guilt you feel, it means you care. But caring doesn't mean staying stuck. There's another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes people don't miss you. They miss access to the version of you that made them comfortable. The predictable one, the unchallenging one, the familiar one. When that version disappears, discomfort appears. But discomfort isn't harm. It's an invitation. Some will grow toward it. Some won't. And that choice is not yours to manage. Your growth doesn't invalidate anyone else's journey. It simply reveals alignment or the lack of it. And alignment matters more than history. Because history alone cannot sustain connection. Only shared direction can. You can love people deeply and still accept they can't walk where you're going. You can honor memories without forcing a future that no longer fits. Because shrinking to preserve comfort doesn't save relationships. It quietly costs you yourself. The guilt won't vanish overnight. It changes shape. It shows up when you're doing well, and think of someone who's no longer there. When you want to share a win and stop yourself. Not out of shame, but consideration. That's not weakness. That's empathy colliding with evolution. The hardest part is this. No one is at fault. Nothing broke. It shifted. And humans struggle with shifts more than endings. Endings give closure. Shifts create confusion. So you replay conversations, question your distance, wonder if you should try harder, and that internal tug of war becomes exhausting because you're trying to carry who you were and who you're becoming at the same time. And eventually, something has to give. Here's what matters most. Outgrowing others doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means the way you love them changes. Love doesn't always mean proximity. Sometimes it means acceptance without attachment. And that's one of the hardest forms of love there is. Because attachment feels like loyalty. But attachment can also demand that you stay small. Growth disrupts dynamics. Not aggressively, not intentionally, just by being honest. Some people lean in. Others retreat. Neither response makes you wrong. You are not responsible for managing everyone else's comfort. You are responsible for living honestly. And honesty doesn't require cruelty. It requires clarity. You can release the need to be understood by everyone. Let relationships find their natural distance. Stop apologizing for change. That's when guilt softens. Outgrowing others isn't failure. It's evidence your inner world expanded faster than your environment. Yes, it can feel lonely, but it also creates space for alignment, for conversations that stretch you, for connections that don't require explanation. So if you're carrying guilt right now, let this settle gently. You didn't become distant to hurt anyone. You became honest with yourself. And that honesty deserves respect. Growth will always change who walks beside you, but it will bring you closer to who you are. And that is not something to feel guilty about. It's something to honor.